I'd spent a few days in Asheville visiting relatives. I live in Georgia, so it's almost a full day's drive. On my last day in Asheville, my cousin Leah commented on my Instagram story asking when I'd be leaving. I replied, "Today." She told me she lived 40 minutes from town, which, by chance, was exactly in the direction of my house. I hadn't seen Leah in years, and it would be nice to reconnect. She suggested I swing by, and I thought, why not? It's not like I'm in a hurry. I entered her address into my GPS, and the device estimated about an hour's drive. Leah and I had been close as kids, but we'd lost touch after she moved up north. We followed each other on social media, but we hadn't really talked in years. When I arrived, I noticed her house was a bit isolated. Not abandoned or anything, just set back from the main road. The gravel driveway crunched under my tires, and when she opened the door, I caught a scent of cinnamon and old dust, like a forgotten library in an attic. Leah, of course, was very welcoming. She gave me a tight hug and pulled me inside. Some connections stay alive no matter how much time passes. The interior of the house was as peculiar as the exterior. The walls were lined with dusty books, and every step I took on the wooden floor led out a small creak. It had a very mountain cabin vibe, somehow even cozy, as if I'd stepped into an old fairy tale. We sat in the living room chatting about life and drinking wine. It was already around 6 p.m. One glass turned into two, two into three, and before I knew it, I was pretty drunk. The warmth of the alcohol made the room feel more intimate, safer, but also heavier. Hours passed like seconds. We were having so much fun reminiscing that inevitably she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Hey, sweetie, you've got a long drive ahead. Why don't you just spend the night here?" I hesitated, but she was right. I wasn't in any condition to drive. "Okay," I said, "great idea. Can I sleep on the couch?" "No way! I've got a guest room. It's not fancy, but it's better than the couch." I gladly accepted. We ordered pizza, and after a while, she led me down a narrow hallway to the guest room. I didn't pay much attention to the surroundings. I was completely wasted, just like she was. I only remember the air in the room felt still, as if it hadn't been used in a very, very long time. I barely had time to take in my surroundings before collapsing onto the bed, exhausted and drunk. In the middle of the night, I woke up. My throat was dry, my head throbbed, and the room was dark, except for a bit of moonlight seeping through the curtains. That's when I heard it. On the shelf next to the bed, there was something. At first, it looked like an old pendulum clock tucked between two thick books. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the sound of it started to feel wrong. It had a tick-tock that was too slow, almost as if it were counting something other than time. My heart raced. I didn't remember seeing it when I'd stumbled into the room, but maybe, in my drunken state, I'd just missed it. I turned over, trying to ignore it. It's just a clock, nothing more. But I couldn't resist. I peeked again. It was still there. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced myself back to sleep. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up again, and it wasn't just from discomfort, it was because of a sound. A soft metallic click, like someone had gently turned the hands of a clock with their fingers. I opened my eyes instantly. The room was already faintly lit. The dawn was beginning to filter through the curtain gaps. I turned my head toward the shelf, and my stomach lurched. The clock was gone. I sat up so fast, my head spun. My whole body vibrated with a nauseating mix of fear and hangover. I looked around, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing on the shelf, just stacked books and golden dust in the morning light. I threw off the covers and ran to Leah's room. She was snoring, totally unaware of the panic consuming me. I shook her hard. It took effort since she was deeply asleep from the alcohol. Finally, she woke up, confused, rubbing her eyes. "The clock!" I gasped. "That one on the shelf in the guest room." She frowned, perplexed. "What clock?" "The pendulum one. Between the books, it had this weird tick-tock." Leah sat up, now more alert. "Sweetie, I don't have a pendulum clock. I don't even have a shelf in that room." I stared at her, waiting for her to say it was a joke, that she was messing with me. But her expression stayed serious. "Come see," I insisted. She sighed, but got up and followed me back to the guest room. I pointed exactly to the spot. "It was right there." Leah scratched her head. "Are you sure you dreamed it?" "I know what I heard," I replied, my voice slightly trembling. "I woke up and it was there. Then I woke up again and it was gone." We stood there for a few moments, both feeling the same uneasy silence pressing down on the room. Finally, Leah agreed we should search the house, just to be safe. We looked in every room, every shelf, every corner. Nothing. No sign of a break-in, no old clock hidden anywhere, nothing that could explain what I heard. Eventually, Leah tried to convince me that maybe I'd been in that liminal state between sleep and wakefulness, imagining sounds that weren't real. I wanted to believe that. Seriously, I'd take that explanation over the alternative any day. As soon as the sun fully rose, I grabbed my things, said goodbye, and left. I almost felt guilty leaving her alone after that. During the entire drive back to Georgia, my mind kept circling back to that moment, waking up and hearing that slow tick-tock watching me from the corner of the room, and falling silent before dawn. Maybe Leah played a cruel prank on me, but to this day, she's never admitted to anything, so I doubt it. Or maybe, just maybe, someone had been in that house, listening to me sleep, and decided to stop counting time before sunrise. This happened to me when I was 19. I was on a trip with my aunt and uncle and a college friend we'll call Leo. The story takes place in Portugal. We were road tripping along the coast, about a 7-hour drive to our destination. The plan was to visit a maritime museum and sleep at a nearby hostel, but we hadn't made any reservations. On the day of the trip, we arrived at the village where the museum was located. Since we only planned to visit it the next day, we needed a place to sleep. Because we'd brought sleeping bags in the car, my uncle searched online for a hostel in the area. He found one that seemed decent and cheap, so he called to confirm. Unfortunately, that weekend coincided with a local traditional festival, and the hostel was fully booked. Since we hadn't reserved in advance, there were no rooms left for us. My uncle called other places, but we couldn't find any lodging with reasonable prices close to the museum. Our only option was to look for a spot to spend the night outdoors. We set the GPS to the nearest viewpoint inside a coastal park to avoid fines for illegal parking. Eventually, we found a spot in a remote area near a deactivated lighthouse. When we arrived, an elderly couple was walking around, so we asked if it was allowed to sleep in the car there and whether it was a good place to spend the night. The man told us yes, it was a quiet spot and rarely patrolled. Based on that, we decided to park at a small dirt overlook surrounded by cliffs with a view of the ocean. About 15 minutes away, there was a rocky cove. At first, we thought about sleeping on the beach,
but something told me it would be better to stay at the overlook. When we got out of the car to settle in for the night, I noticed a rusty van parked farther back on the overlook. It looked abandoned, and there was no one inside. I thought it was strange, since it was already late afternoon, and there was no one left at the cove or walking the trails. At the time, though, I didn't think much of it. I helped my aunt and uncle set up their sleeping bags in the back seat. They'd sleep there, while Leo and I would take the front seats, all of us close together. After adjusting the seats, we finally settled in. Leo and I made the space cozy, watched YouTube videos, and ate cookies. It was already around 10:30 p.m., and we wanted to go to bed early so we wouldn't be too tired the next day. Around midnight, we decided to go to sleep. My aunt and uncle were already asleep in the back. Leo and I were still scrolling through Instagram when suddenly we heard a wet sound coming from the overlook. It sounded like a rope being dragged over rocks. We jumped in fright and whispered to each other, trying to figure out what it was. Too scared to peek out the car windows, we chose to stay silent and listen. The sound had come from the same direction as the abandoned van. Next, we heard what sounded like the rope being wound around something metallic, followed by the creak of a door closing. We froze, hearts racing. After that, we heard the van start up and speed away as if someone were fleeing in a hurry. I texted a cousin who lived in a nearby town, telling him where we were. He replied, warning me that this cove was known to be dangerous. Smugglers often used the area to unload illegal goods. We had no idea about any of this beforehand. When I read my cousin's message, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt deeply unsettled. About 10 minutes of silence passed after the van left. Leo and I were just starting to calm down a little when out of nowhere we heard the loudest, most terrifying scream I've ever heard in my life, a woman's scream coming from the cliffs. We were absolutely horrified. I immediately texted my aunt to tell her we'd heard a scream. When she didn't reply, I called to wake her up. She finally answered and said she nor my uncle had heard anything. She tried to reassure me, saying it probably wasn't anything serious. But at that moment, I couldn't imagine any normal reason for someone to scream like that. Leo and I curled up in our sleeping bags, terrified, with no idea what was going on. Every minute felt like an hour. Even though it was midnight, we were too scared to sleep. Suddenly, everything went eerily quiet. That's when my blood ran cold. I heard footsteps. Someone was walking around our car, moving quietly. Leo and I sat up, paralyzed by fear. I turned off my phone screen so the light wouldn't illuminate the inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my own pulse. There was no logical explanation for someone to be walking there among the cliffs at that hour. The footsteps circled our car first, then headed toward the overlook and finally stopped near where the van had parked. The person stood still for a moment, as if watching our vehicle. There was absolute silence. Then we heard the same van returning. Its headlights lit up our car, and Leo and I quickly lay down so we wouldn't be seen. I gathered the courage to peek through the window crack. I saw the van door slam shut and the vehicle sped off again, disappearing down the coastal road. I felt a brief sense of relief when the person left. From my vantage point, I could see the curve where the van had vanished. 5 minutes later, I saw another car approaching at high speed. It was a Coast Guard vehicle, heading exactly in the same direction. Nothing else happened after that. Leo and I were still shaken, so we decided to lock all the doors and keep the windows rolled up to feel safer. I stayed awake until about 5 a.m., watching the cliffs, while Leo eventually fell asleep beside me. After an hour, we rearranged ourselves and, exhausted, finally managed to sleep. We woke up around 9 a.m., completely drained. I told my aunt everything, and she revealed that she'd also heard the footsteps. When the person passed near the car, she'd heard a hoarse whisper, the kind you hear in stories about missing sailors. She'd been terrified too. My uncle, on the other hand, had slept soundly through it all. Without hesitation, we packed our things and left as quickly as possible. None of us wanted to stay a single minute longer in that place. Despite the terrifying night, we had a good day at the Maritime Museum. But that night, I decided to research the lighthouse where we'd parked. What I found made me sick. Shortly before our visit, a woman had gone missing there. Abducted by traffickers after trying to report illegal activities at the port. Even worse, 2 fishermen had been found dead in that exact cove, their hands tied with maritime rope. I can't stop thinking about it. What if the person who walked around our car was a smuggler checking for witnesses? What if we'd been in real danger without even realizing it? To this day, I still wonder, who let out that desperate scream? Why would someone drag a rope in the middle of the night at a remote overlook? And the Coast Guard, what exactly were they chasing? I guess I'll never know. This is a story that still haunts me every time I think about it.
I know this account will be a bit short, but it still lingers in my mind. Why? 7 years old is about the age when many of my childhood memories start to take shape. I have an older sister named Clara, who is 3 years older than me. At the time, she was 10 and I was 7. I had a strict bedtime, 9 p.m. If I disobeyed or if our mom caught us awake past that hour, we'd be in serious trouble. She was always very firm with us when we were kids. I don't remember if this happened on a summer night or not, but I woke up in the middle of the night to Clara poking me. We shared a small room at the back of the house. My parents' bedroom was across the hallway. I was confused about why she was waking me up until she whispered for me to be quiet and look. That's when I saw what she meant. It was our father's silhouette standing outside our bedroom window, but it was completely dark out, and he shouldn't have been there. I was about to get up and call out to him, but Clara stopped me. She said she didn't think it was really Dad. "Stop trying to scare me," I remember snapping at her, but she insisted, "Go closer and look." I got up and walked to the window. Right next to it stood Grandma's old dresser full of handkerchiefs and faded photographs. Directly to the left of the bed was the window facing the backyard, and that window had light, almost sheer curtains. I pressed my face against the glass and saw the figure more clearly. It looked exactly like our dad, standing on the damp grass, staring in. "Clara, Leo." "It's Dad," Clara said. "No, it's not," she replied. Somehow, even though I was the younger brother and only 7 years old, I was the one who found the courage to pull back the curtains and face the window head on. But at that moment, the figure vanished. "Dad left," I whispered. "No, it's not Dad," she repeated. I kept telling her to shut up, saying she was scaring me. I slowly opened the window, just a crack, to feel the night air. When I opened it wide enough, I peeked outside. There in the backyard, under the dim street lamp light, it was as clear as daylight, the silhouette of a man, tall, shoulders hunched. But right away, I knew it wasn't our father. Whoever it was, he saw me, and he said, in a soft, familiar voice, "Hey son,
Open the window." I slammed the window shut immediately, locked it, and ran back to bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. I started trembling. Clara just kept repeating, "I told you." We agreed we should scream as loud as possible to wake our parents. We counted to 3, and on 3, we started banging our hands against the wall and shouting at the top of our lungs. It didn't take long for our parents to come running down the hallway, knocking on our bedroom door. At first, Mom was angry that we had opened the window, but as soon as they came in, they saw I was shaking and that we were genuinely terrified. They listened to us. Dad looked especially tense. He immediately said he hadn't been in the backyard and hadn't called our names. He asked what the man looked like, but all we could say was that we hadn't been able to see his face. Meanwhile, I remember Mom went to the window and yanked the curtains shut, probably searching for any sign of that figure. After a while, Dad said goodnight to us again. I'm almost certain he told us to keep the window locked, something he'd never done before. I was too young to understand it at the time, but it seemed like my parents knew exactly who it might have been. Later, Claire and I heard the sound of a car stopping on the street. We peeked through the curtain gap and saw a black car parked in front of the house. We wanted to ask about it, but we stayed silent. I remember we begged our parents to tell us who that person was and what had happened, but they always said they didn't know. They also kept repeating how proud they were that we hadn't opened the window. Personally, I think they did know who it was. But to protect my sister and I from any additional trauma or fear, they simply never told us. Years later, the last time I had lunch with my parents, I asked about the incident. They still just shrugged and said it was probably just some lost neighbor. But that never explained how that man knew our names.